Welcome back. Let's talk more about Siamese cosmopolitanism. In the last lecture, we talked a little about, and we began to discuss the idea of having a disciplined, interdisciplinary approach to studying ethnicity. And although as social scientists, as sociologists and anthropologists, we base most of what we do on our own primary research. It may be in the form of surveys, or it may be the form of field work, participant observation and interviews. We study ethnic identity, ethnicity, but in the last lecture I talked about how the use and the interaction with maps and with murals, for me, as I was getting my head around a new set of Muslim communities, not in South Thailand where I worked for many years, but in central Thailand, specifically Ayutthaya, the way that my interaction with these historical sources helped me as I began to get my head around the diversity that I encountered amongst Muslim communities in Ayutthaya, for example. Maps of Ayutthaya showed mosques, murals in Ayutthaya and the early Bangkok period showed there was an ethnically diverse group of traders trading in Ayutthaya and later in Bangkok. And so this is the second of a series looking at this idea of Siamese cosmopolitanism. And in the last lecture we looked at maps, we looked at cartography, which is the fancy word for maps, and we looked at murals, we looked at the visual arts. And today I'm wanting to introduce some work, some relatively recent work done by a scholar called Van Roy, and a piece of work done about 20 years ago by a German historian called Volker Grabowski. And so last time we looked at maps and we looked at pictures, and now we're going to be looking at what we as social scientists can gain from interacting with census data specifically. And in the case of Van Roy, social scientists, anthropologists and sociologists going out of our way to read social historians. And remember, this is a reading course. This is a course first and foremost, primarily of directed reading, where I am wanting to present recently published works or works that have been around for quite a while that really are going to help you answer the questions that you are asking. Books and articles that are going to, in a sense, be the thing which helps you scratch where you are itching. So let's start with a look at some of the insights about Siamese cosmopolitanism that existed at the turn of the 20th century. And this lecture is going to be dipping into and based on, and is going to be highly recommending an important article written by Volker Grabowski in the Journal of the Siamese Society. Now you will see the reference there, and you will see that I've done some screen captures. You'll see that using Adobe Reader or Adobe Acrobat Pro, that I have highlighted this version of this article, because if we are going to interact, if we're going to learn anything, we have to read. In the old days when you read, you used to make notes in books. These days, you can annotate PDFs, you can highlight, you can make notes, and that is what I've done here. And one of the interesting things that Volker Grabowski does in this article he presents a very important census conducted by what was then known as the Siamese. And as you know, this was in the time of Aroha, and so King Chulalongkorn. And the data collected in this census in 1904 was done with the assistance of the British, who were very experienced conductors of census in their many colonies, and they were used to putting together a census which tried to guess about the ethnic diversity of the colonies that they were managing. And as part of this census, and as part of his analysis of the census, Volker Grabowski, he presents some summaries, and he does this in the form of maps, and he does this in the form of tables. Now again, you will have to excuse the way that this particular version of this article is annotated by me, and I have interests in Malay populations, and I have interests in the Malay populations that existed in the Konsi Tamarat and in other montons. So this was taken during the time before provinces, the modern day provinces of Thailand, were established, and before then a number of administrative units existed, and at this time in 1904 there were monton. And so what is in present day Patani, Yala and Narati Wat was then in the monton of Nakhon Tamarat. And so what does this show us? Well, let's just have a bit of a look at these tables. Now, all of these are available for you on the course material. They are not difficult to find. Even if you did not have a copy of that, I am almost certain that this article of the Journal of the Siam Society is available to everyone on the Journal of Siam Society's website, except for the last 5 years. All of their articles are available. And so, the first thing we are told here, the first ethnic minority in Thailand that was present in this census was the Mon. And you will see in map number 5 the parts of present-day Thailand where there was over 10% of the population who identified as Mon. So over 10 per 1,000, or 10%. But in addition to that, there were many other provinces that contained significant Mon populations. The second map shows us where large Malay communities existed. They show us the parts of Thailand, or Siam, as it existed at the time, where there were subjects of Bangkok who identified in the census as Malay. And you will see how far up the peninsula these go. You will see that from Ranong and from the Konsi Tamarat, the population is less. In this census, there was no data from Bangkok, but you will see that the Malay population goes all the way up into central Thailand, and this for me is very interesting, a very interesting snapshot of the size and distribution of the Mon ethnic minorities and the Malay ethnic minorities, and in map number 4 we see the size and the spread of the Khmer ethnic minority that existed in Siam in 1904 when this lecture was done. And we will see that it is no surprise if you know anything about the Khmer population in Thailand, that these are concentrated in what is known as southern Isan on the Khmer border. Obviously, these boundaries, the boundaries that existed in 1904 have changed to what they are now. Thirdly, we have the Chinese population, and you will see how incredibly large and widespread throughout the country Chinese were in Thailand in 1904. I think these provide a very, very interesting snapshot about the ethnic diversity of Thailand. This is one more example of the way in which social scientists, whether they be sociologists or anthropologists, gain so much when they pursue an interdisciplinary approach to ethnic studies. Cartographers, people interested in the visual arts, and people who are demographers, who study censuses and have an interest in human geography. And so that is Volker Grabowski's work, and what I want to talk to you briefly about, and there will almost inevitably be parts of Edward Van Rooij's recently published Siamese melting pot, Ethnic Minorities in the Making of Bangkok. I will almost inevitably be giving you a bit of information from his book in other lectures as we talk about ethnicity in Thailand, and we grapple with the phenomenon of ethnic defection and of the phenomenon of ethnogenesis. And if you haven't come across those terms before, you will before the end of the course. And so Siamese Melting Pot is a recently published book, and Volker Grabowski is an historian, but he wore another hat of demographer, interacting with the census data. Edward Van Rooij is a social historian who for many years has studied a range of communities in Bangkok, with the asking research questions around the ethnic origins of these communities. And so why don't we quickly just go through some maps and some tables that will that are a part of his monograph. I really do recommend you get a hold of this monograph. It's a very, very well written and fascinating account by the social historian about ethnic diversity in Thailand. And so let's go to the big screen. Let's get in a bit closer here. Okay, so he provides a very, very interesting summary of the symbolic centre of Krung Thep. Krung Thep's symbolic centre centred around the palace, the citadel, and he shows the development of this beginning in 1782 through to 1809, and then through into 1904, in an era where he refers to as the post-Mandala city. And so If you don't know these terms, this is the reason why I've given you a range of reference works on the Google Drive. And if you've downloaded the Google Drive, and if you've indexed this directory, you will be able to Google terms like mandala, and you will find an article that talks about the concept of mandala, which is a concept, a pre-modern concept, which understood that any kingdom had a symbolic center where the king and his charisma resided. And so these are some reminders. If you are Thai, you know all about this already. And if you are taking this as someone with not a significant background in Thai studies, you may be encountering these terms for the first time. This is summarized from Grabowski, and Grabowski included a summary of accounts by a range of foreign visitors. There are British, they are French, as well as Dutch and some Americans, and they make some estimations about the size of the ethnic minorities that existed. Now, obviously, the Thais are the majority in all of these. And the estimates range, and they range for a number of reasons. The most important is that these people made these estimates. They were unscientific estimates at different times, from 1822 until 1904, which was when this census was done. But we can see that there were a significant number of ethnic minorities, specifically Lao, Chinese, Malay, Khmer, Mon, and the Karen are also mentioned here as well. So let's just again keep on full screen mode so that we can see what we're talking about. We have three tables on the left hand side, and again these are estimates of the major ethnic groups in 1782, 1851 and 1910, and we have a breakdown of the various Chinese dialects that were present in the Chinese community. So the Chinese community in 1910 was estimated to be 400,000, and we see the breakdown of the dialect spoken in table 1.5. We see another breakdown on the size of the non-Chinese ethnic minorities. And again, to make the point, by far the largest three are the Mon, the Lao, and the Malay. Following this are a number of smaller ones, the Jam, which are Muslims from Cambodia, Persians, and the rest of the details you can read yourself. Where were these communities residing? Well, this is a map of the location of these ethnic minorities, some of which were inside the walled city, and some of them were out, the Thonburi citadel, both West Thonburi and East Thonburi. And we can see, for example, that in the East Thonburi, there were Chinese communities inside the citadel. Here is some more information about the distribution of these ethnic minorities in Thailand. Again, some were inside the citadel, most were outside. And where were they? It is no surprise. that these were located on the edges of the Chao River and the Klongs, the canals, which was the main highway at the time. These are taken from between 1767, when Bangkok was, this was at the end of the Ayutthaya period, and 1851, which was in the Bangkok period. On the topic of the Mon, because previous maps would have shown you where the Mon were located in 1910 from Grabowski, but here we see the presence of Mon temples north of Ayutthaya and how these were connected with trade routes to the west, where the Mon heartland exists. We have some more details about Mon temples and Mon communities in Bangkok, both between 1767 and 1782, and much later on in 1910, which was after the census. Muslim communities in Bangkok are many, and they are large, and these are predominantly ethnically Malay communities, although there are some significant communities who were Javanese immigrants, Cham immigrants, as well as Persians. And again, these are a breakdown of whereabouts these were located. And Van Roy has done an excellent job at pointing out communities that were Cham, Persian, Arab, Indian, Malay, and from the Indonesian archipelago. Chinese communities whereabouts were these located, and here is so the relative size of these Chinese dialects, Hainanese, Cantonese, Hakka, Hokkien, etc. They were provided by Van Roy earlier, but these are details not of the size, but about where they were located. Okay, so we're going to be making a few concluding comments about these two presentations about Chinese cosmopolitanism in the next lecture. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.